Might as well just have a little more of that before we go to break with Mr. Innocent Chukuma, who is Regional Director for West Africa for Ford Foundation. Thank you for coming on this morning. Man. Well, you know, there will be more reactions about this in the force, and one wonders if this is helping to improve the interagency rivalry, or is this even deepening the rivalry, this Board of Inquiry's reports on this type of case?
Yeah, I think it's not going to help in dealing with the age-old interagency rivalry between the police and the military. And quite frankly, when I saw the composition of the panel, when it was set up, I didn't give it much faith because it was heavily stacked against the police. It was made up of mostly representative of many institutions. If the attempt was to make it broader so that we can have a more dispassionate outcome, we should have included the customs, we should have included immigration, and perhaps road safety, because these are civilianized law enforcement agencies to balance the heavy representation of the military. And if you look at the report, although we don't have the comprehensive report, what we have is a press release by the acting director of Defense Information. Two words that I saw in that press release caught my fancy, which was where they said, oh, what led to the death of these police officers and civilians were infractions and miscommunication. Mm-hmm. And if by infraction they meant this periodic bloodletting between the police and the military, I think it goes beyond infraction. Infraction is a minor squabbles, but to the extent that over the years, I remember in May 2011, the DPO of Badagry Police Station, Samson Salusi, the divisional crime officer, and 6 other police officers who, as a result of squabbles on the streets of Badagry between the military and the police, a soldier died, and they went on a peace mission. They were ambushed on the road and killed, and today, nothing has happened. So it's not infraction. And then miscommunication. Miscommunication suggests an innocent mistake. I think what we may be dealing here with, if we look at the videos that have been circulated, is disinformation, which is deliberate spreading of falsehood
on the part of
on the part of the officers that were involved in that. If you look at when they had identified, when they ambushed them, and one of them who at the point of dying said, I'm a police officer. If it was miscommunication, that would have cleared up that these were officers we are dealing with, and perhaps take them to medical facilities.
So you think that rivalry played up?
Yes, it could have not. Like I said, I keep going back. I don't have all the report. But to say that this is just miscommunication, I think we are missing the point here. And that's why we need to separate two issues at stake here.
I think it was more of, standard operating procedures. That was also mentioned in the report.
It was mentioned, but if you read, it said these were as a result of infraction and miscommunication.
So specifically, looking at the standard operating procedures, you don't think that was also,
No, this is a second-level issue. The standard operating procedure suggests, when police officers were sent on that mission, did they communicate with their divisions there, which is what the police would decide. And then on the military, the officers who ordered the ones on the street to look out for this vehicle, Hummer bus that was coming, did they communicate with them? So it's a second level, but they blame what had led to this death primarily on infraction and miscommunication. And I think it goes beyond miscommunication. We might be dealing with a case of disinformation where somebody alerted his unit that these guys are kidnappers, they're coming your way, stop them. So we need more inquiry, and like I said, separate the two issues. There's a murder case here, which the police, the criminal investigation department should lead. And if the military feels that being an issue involving the police and the police alone could not be trusted to deal with it, then send military police. which is the arm of the military that deals with the investigation involving discipline of officers. And then the other one, the rivalry, requires a separate inquiry that should be much more detailed than what the Board of Inquiry will do with.
In addition to finding out what next, when we come back, stay with us. All right, welcome back. Well, Mr. Chukwuma, you know, that particular report, if it's not going to achieve its purpose, shouldn't they have left the police to handle all of this? Because if they recommend a further investigation of Hamisu, that was what the police were going to do in the first instance.
You know, it's becoming a habit in this country when an incident that is clear-cut with clear legal provision as to how to deal with it happens. Rather than resort to that, we look for ways of if you like, dousing the tension and ultimately leaving it unaddressed. You have situations where when an issue, the government feels that the public wants something to do about it. So an inquiry becomes a tunnel through which government and government department escapes the responsibility. So I had expected that when this incident happened, the issue should have been separated. Investigate the crime of murder, alleged murder that had happened.
The investigation function, that's clearly the police.
Clearly the police. Like I said earlier, if the military or any other agencies feel that because it was an issue involving the police and the military, then send observers. That's why we have an observer mission.
Well, Mr. Chukwuma, I don't know, maybe for better understanding. The report, the first item on the report says something like, the directive of the president for an immediate investigation into the unfortunate incident that led to the killing of 3 Nigerian police force and other. Maybe we should say that it's an investigation into the unfortunate incident, not the killing.
Precisely.
How appropriate, how necessary was it in the first place?
No, the president may want to get to the bottom of the root causes.
Root causes of what?
Why the police and the military are always coming into this kind of confrontation, which, as I said earlier, has been there.
It's not new, just as you said. In the build-up to this whole case, even before this board of inquiry was set up, my research revealed at least 5 between 2011 that you talked about and before the time before the Wadume case. At least 5 between the military and the police. Definitely, there have been panels of inquiry, and what's the assurance that this is going to be any different? Because even this report says it is to forestall future occurrence.
It didn't go deep enough, and the composition is not adequate to actually begin to deal with the full extent of the matter. And it's not too late because murder case, they say, cannot expire, right? The police, I actually expect them on the basis of the outcome of this to say, what we are going to do does not preclude whatever the president or any other agencies wants to do with a view to getting to the bottom of this institutional rivalry. But we are going ahead where the fellow in question, Wadume, had made some confession. He should be put on trial. The military officer who was involved in this, the military should release him and others involved for trial. And then we need to come back to ask ourselves, why do we have institutional contempt in the military for the police? Why do we have continuing police resentment on the part of the military for always taking over their function? And who is directing all this takeover of clear policing function? Is the government.
You know, I would like to quickly point out something. I mean, this report, this BOI's report came out a few days ago, and we've not exactly heard anything from the Nigeria Police Force. Do you think that says a lot? I mean, they say silence is probably a lot.
Well, firstly is that who constituted this board of inquiry? It was a directive of the president. So if the police has any comment on this report, they will channel it to the presidency. They are not expected to come to the public to air their views.
But when this happened, I mean, you saw the response of the police on social media, putting out statements. So now that this is coming out and the police has not said anything, so perhaps that means they have accepted.
No, because
this.
the president had intervened. Prior to this board of inquiry, the president had not directed anything. So the police and the military were airing their own views. But after the president intervened, none of them is expected to counter whatever the president decides. So it's now going back to the president. Because again, we must identify where this problem started. I would have expected, the government to set up a broad-based panel that will be broadly representative of the people involved, that's the agencies, and also drawing from the civilian population. For crying out loud, there are people who have spent their life researching these issues, police-military relations, civilian-police relations, civil-military relations, and all of that to bring scholarly perspective into resolving this issue.
But then, if you look at what transpired, the police, the IRT team, they had intel, they had moved in, they were in transit, transporting the subject in this case, and this happened. So to them, this is a clear criminal offense. This is murder. Do we need a special panel
My
to come into this?
My opinion is no on the specific issue of the crime that has been committed. But there is need for a panel because this has persisted, as he rightly pointed out, between 2011 and now, we have had over 4. So what is at the root of this? We need to find out. I bet we need a properly constituted and broadly representative panel to get to the... And what is causing it is simply that over the years, police functions have been eroded by all kinds of military
I know there's been
intervention.
several recommendations.
Yeah.
What would you recommend we do to ensure that both agencies don't keep going at each other?
One is that we have to define the role of the military.
Isn't it?
Doesn't
the Constitution define
in
it?
peacekeeping time. No, the Constitution also says that they could be asked to intervene when they... The same thing, the police can be drafted into a military operation during war situation. So there is an omnibus clause that can be exploited to draw from any... Even you and I as civilians, when there is a state of emergency, we can be recruited. Oh. Because as citizens of this country, we owe it as an obligation to defend our fatherland. So there is that omnibus provision in the law. But having said that, we need to sit down whenever, if we have not declared a state of emergency, requiring the military to intervene in civil pollution, what should they do? Because it's their frequent... Look at now in the southeast and southwest, beginning from, I think it's November 1, we'll have another round of all these, is it operation... whatever you have it. And these are interventions that have been broadly condemned by the citizens in these regions, but the military keep coming. And you ask yourself, why do we need all these operations by the military when the police are not there? Meanwhile, where they are seriously needed in the northeast, we don't seem to have enough of them.
Does that suggest that the police is understaffed?
Police has its institutional problem that needs to be dealt with. But it shouldn't be used as an excuse for another agency that has very clear defined rule to keep taking over policing functions.
And then speaking about the police, guys, they came up with this revised order 237, which they say they wanted to ensure that, because there's always been that complaint from the citizenry concerning how the rank and file conduct themselves. So they think, both in terms of weapon handling, discipline, they want better. They want these things to go on a lot better. But if you look at some of the high points of that order, which some of them have been speaking to, so if we can see just 1 or 2 of it, where they're suggesting that if they go ahead and put in place some of these measures, that it just might achieve that result. Do you see that happen?
Well, firstly, is that it's a step in the right direction. I was actually involved in the process of revising this order when I was working with the Civil Liberties Organization in 1994. I did write a report titled Above the Law, a report of police torture and extrajudicial killing in Nigeria. And the issue of the, if you like, it was described as a carte blanche provision in the then Order 237 for the police to, use their weapons, resort to lethal force in a matter where other non-lethal measures. So it's a welcome development. But the question is, there are also other provisions in the Police Act, because this is a police order, it's a police policy. You have a provision in the Police Act that suggests that the police can actually use lethal weapon in tracking down a fleeing felon. Fleeing for somebody who is already running, your life is not at stake, because what the UN minimum rule on use of force and firearms is that you use force and firearms when when other non-lethal measures could not solve the problem and when the officer's life is at stake. So yes, we have a revised Order 237, but we also have provisions in the 1943 Police Act that have not been amended. And between a policy and the law, which one has a weightier force in due process?
And let's not forget, there's also that clause of based on their discretion. And I mean, they say things happen so fast. I mean, you have to make decisions in split seconds. But then one major issue also is the fact that this might not be in force anytime soon. And I mean, we're looking at a situation where we need to put this, reforms into effect as soon as possible. So what time frame are we looking at?
No, it's already been issued, but they need resources to socialize and mainstream that report within their rank and file. Police formations are across Nigeria. It was released in Abuja. It needs to be printed in large copies to make available. And if you look at it, it's such a bulky document. It needs to be reduced into a pocket-sized laminated card that an officer can put in his or her shirt pocket so that you can draw it out. The format it is now is too bulky for an average police person to actually read and understand. So a lot needs to be done in terms of creating public awareness within the police about the provisions of this Force Order 237, and also within the public, because without the public reporting any infractions to say, for instance, the police complaints unit, it will not really be enforced. So, yes, it's been released, but we need to take measures to mainstream it within the force and also create a public awareness about it.
The discretionary thing that Kadi mentioned earlier, I think it's something that one needs to give a little bit more attention, because the quite often the revised Order 237 talks about reasonable means, reasonable, subjected to the whim of that policeman at that time. And he has to take decisions within split seconds. That puts to question or calls for an upgrade of the mind of the officer who we are laying this on. Do you see that happening quick enough?
Yeah, so the issue of discretion and reasonability or reasonableness is something you can't deny a law enforcement official. But there are also measures for determining whether indeed an act was carried within reason. It's been long established that if somebody is shot on the forehead, then it's point blank, because the forehead is the most difficult target when somebody is in motion. So if somebody says, oh, my life was threatened and all of that, and I shot somebody at the forehead, then there are measures for investigating. If somebody is shot in the back, it means the person is running away. The life of the officer in question was not at stake. So you can't say, oh, within a split second, my life was... So there are ways of checking the use of discretionary powers.
But that would have been done after the fellow may have died.
Yeah, but the whole idea of training, which I talked about, is to socialize them through all these handmaids that will prevent them from extreme resort to lethal force in the name of discretion or acting within a reasonability.
All of these measures that are being put in place, excuse me, time and again, do you think that we can actually get the desired results if we don't take a look at what the VP has consistently said, which is you can't police a country the size of Nigeria centrally from Abuja?
It's just one measure out of several that are needed, because these things cannot be taken in isolation. The officer in question that we don't want to resort to lethal force, have we armed him or her with non-lethal equipment that will make them confident when they confront situations to use whether do they have helmets, do they have tear gas. So you have to equip them with graduated measures of dealing with situation before resort to last cause, which is lethal force. If we don't equip them with that, then there is so much we can expect them to do when faced with somebody who is armed or whom they felt is armed. You know, everybody's self-defense is the first, law of nature. You know, so we really need to do it. So this is one important measure, but it needs to go hand in hand with several other, which I don't see the Nigerian government doing too soon. So we may come back here again to discuss this issue.
Well, we'll see what happens. Well, at least thank you for coming on this morning. Innocent Chukwuma is the Regional Director for Ford Foundation in West Africa. We're back in a moment. Don't go away.